Hey friends, Gary here. I'm an enthusiast photographer and a big fan of Micro Four Thirds camera system. When it comes to Micro Four Thirds, there are plenty of great options for lenses for all sorts of needs, whether it's for landscape photography, travel photography, street photography, or even portrait. However, because the choices are plenty, sometimes we get multiple lenses covering similar functions. These last few days, I got some requests to compare between two legendary Micro Four Thirds mid telephoto large aperture lenses. They are the Panasonic Lumix 35-100mm f2.8 and the Olympus 75mm f1.8. Both are actually great portrait lenses. However, they can do so much more than just portrait. I found them also very useful for distant landscape as well. Obviously, on paper, they couldn't be more different. One is a prime lens and the other one is a zoom lens. But once you use them on the field on a real world scenarios, they're actually more similar than you think. The question is, which one is better? The Olympus 75mm f1.8 with its larger aperture or the Panasonic Lumix 35-100mm f2.8 with its zoom capability? Let's find out in today's video. First, let's talk about image quality, and undoubtedly when we're talking about two legendary Micro Four Thirds lenses, the image quality will be flawless. Sharpness, contrast, detail, colors, everything will look nice, so there's no question about that. I will share some sample pictures of these two lenses. Let's begin with the sample pictures of the Olympus 75mm first, and then we will follow with the sample pictures of the Panasonic Lumix 35-100mm. Now, the Olympus 75mm f1.8, it has a reputation of being one of the sharpest Micro Four Thirds lens, if not the sharpest Micro Four Thirds lens ever. It's just so detailed. The picture taken using this guy is just fantastic, and it has no flaw, as I mentioned before. Detail, contrast, color, everything just looks so nice. With the Olympus 75mm, it feels like you don't really need to stop down at all to get the maximum amount of sharpness and to get that optical perfection. You can just shoot everything wide open at f1.8 and you'll get great results. That's the beauty of the Olympus 75mm f1.8. Now, when we're talking about the Panasonic Lumix 35-100mm f2.8, this is also a great lens. As I mentioned before, also no flaw, so sharpness, detail, color, contrast, everything about this guy is just amazing, and pictures taken using the 35-100 will also look great. Now, one thing about the 35-100 is that you need to stop it down a little bit, in my opinion, to get maximum amount of sharpness. Not that if you're shooting at f2.8 the picture will look horrible. No, not at all. You can get acceptable results shooting wide open at f2.8. But if you're comparing wide open f2.8 with wide open of the Olympus 75mm at f1.8, the sharpness of the Olympus 75mm will win in my experience. I don't know if I get a bad copy of the 35-100, but I think doing a little bit of research, it is true. You need to stop down a little bit with the 35-100. But again, it doesn't mean that the 35-100 is a bad lens. It's just that the Olympus is so impressive in my opinion. Now, from my experience shooting using the Olympus 75mm, the pictures will have a sort of modern, contrasty, clinical vibe, especially the colors. Nothing will look out of place. Everything will just look like you are using a modern lens, and that is a good thing. Also, the out of focus area when you shoot using the Olympus 75mm, you'll get that nice dreamy bokeh. Now, from my experience of shooting using the 35-100mm f2.8, I got a different vibe with my pictures. They look more organic, buttery smooth. It's like a combination between modern and vintage. The colors look kind of pleasant in my eyes, slightly different when you compare it with the Olympus 75mm. I wouldn't call it inferior compared to the Olympus 75mm because I don't think it is inferior at all. I just get a different kind of look. Not really that significant, it's just a subtle kind of thing, but I would describe the 35-100 as a little bit artsy. So the Olympus 75 modern, the 35-100 slightly artsy. Also, when you are using the 35-100mm f2.8 to create that blurred background kind of picture, there's a tendency of this lens to create that swirly bokeh out of focus area. It doesn't mean that it's bad. It's, again, in my own terms, I would call it artsy. So if you're looking for a modern, more clinical kind of look, go with the Olympus 75mm. If you're looking for something a little bit artsy, vibey, has that cool characteristics that you'll enjoy, go with the 35-100mm f2.8. Next, let's talk about performance of these lenses, and what I mean by performance is autofocus speeds as well as some other functions that the lens might provide. Speaking about autofocus speeds of these two lenses, again, the 35-100 and 75 are legendary lenses, so autofocus will be fast, precise, snappy, that's no question. However, if I have to nitpick about the autofocus speed, I will give a slight edge to the 35-100. From my own experience, it is slightly faster compared to the Olympus 75. However, the 75 is no slouch at all when it comes to autofocus speed. So there you go, autofocus speed. Next, I want to talk about close focusing distance, still related to performance, and both of these lenses suck when it comes to close focusing distance, making them slightly less than ideal lenses for close-up product photography, that kind of stuff. One thing that the Panasonic 35-100 has that the Olympus 75mm doesn't have is image stabilizer. So if you are using Micro Four Thirds camera bodies without in-body stabilizer, the 35-100 will provide that stability for you. I think this is useful for slower shutter speed when you are doing photography or to get nice, stable, smooth video footage. Next, let's talk about aperture. And when we're talking about aperture, obviously larger aperture is better. So the Olympus 75mm with its larger f1.8 is technically going to be better compared to the Panasonic 35-100mm with its slightly smaller f2.8 aperture. With the larger aperture, you can create better background blur as well as to have better low light performance. However, when I use these lenses on the field in a real-world scenario, the extra improvement of the larger aperture isn't always significant. I mean, f2.8 is already large enough for most cases. You already get the background blur capability and you get better low-light performance, especially when you compare it to a standard kit lens or any budget lens with f5.6 aperture. So yeah, that doesn't mean that the 35-100 is significantly inferior compared to the Olympus 75mm. I mean, sure, if you want the best of the best in terms of aperture, go with the larger one, but I think you'll still be satisfied with f2.8. Next, let's talk about zoom versus prime. So the zoom versus prime debate has been going on for a long time. Many people talk about it and there's no clear conclusion about which one is better. Inevitably, the two lenses that we're talking right now, one is a zoom lens and the other is a prime lens. So I need to discuss a little bit about this topic. So obviously, zoom lens can cover more ground because you can zoom in and zoom out as opposed to prime. In theory, that is correct. And again, the 35-100, I think with the ability to zoom in and zoom out will provide you a more flexible usage experience compared to the Olympus 75, which only has one focal length. And unfortunately, from my experience, 75 is not really that flexible. It is slightly more challenging to use for everyday photography. However, that doesn't mean that the Olympus 75 cannot be flexible. I mean, if you love a little bit of challenge, you want to try to push yourself, then you can try just using the Olympus 75mm for a few days and use nothing else. By forcing yourself to adapt to these focal lengths, you'll start to see the opportunities of what will look great when captured using 75mm. You will train your eye. Again, I call this process pre-visualization. If you want to learn more about pre-visualization, check out this video up here. But by doing that, I think you'll see that 75 is actually still a very useful and somewhat flexible focal length. So yeah, in terms of performance, a zoom lens can be more flexible. You can zoom in and zoom out. That'll give you more versatility compared a slightly more challenging prime lens with just one focal length. I think there's no doubt about that. However, when we're talking about zoom versus prime, there's also one more viewpoint that we need to discuss besides performance, and that is fun factor. Photography for me nowadays isn't just about getting the best result, the absolute best image quality, the absolute best performance. No, it's not about that entirely. I mean, yeah, nice pictures are great to look at and I want to create nice pictures. But nowadays, photography is also about the process. For me personally, I enjoy slowing down, trying to be more mindful with what I shot, try to immerse myself in my photography world, setting up my camera, setting up my compositions, trying to find a good opportunity to capture my best moments and best compositions, that kind of stuff. That's why I got into micro four thirds and not into other camera formats, because using micro four thirds and trying to immerse myself in this situation is so fun and enjoyable to me. Now, a prime lens can add more tactility and more immersion in the photography process. I mean, it's slightly more challenging compared to using a zoom lens, but a healthy challenge, a challenge that's not too easy or too hard, will make photography more enjoyable and fun in my opinion, especially if you can overcome this challenge and come up with good results using a prime lens. In other words, using the Olympus 75mm could potentially make your photography world more fun compared to using a zoom lens like the 35-100. But again, you need to know your own needs and requirements. Do you prefer something that's more fun, or you need that absolute best versatility? And that leads me nicely to sharing my personal preference, which lens that I like to use for specific scenarios, and these are all based on my personal requirements and needs. First, for portrait, definitely I will choose the Olympus 75mm compared to the Panasonic 35-100, simply because this has larger aperture and better background blur, which is important for portrait. That's not to say that the Panasonic 35-100 cannot produce great portraits. I've taken some nice portrait shots using the 35-100 and I have no problem with it, but it's just that the Olympus is slightly more optimal for portrait. A couple of issues that I need to share to you regarding using the 35-100 for portrait. First, I already mentioned it, it's the swirling bokeh. Not that it's a big problem for me, but sometimes people prefer that more clinical, a cleaner background blur of the Olympus 75mm. And second issue that I need to share with you is that the 35-100mm suffers from what people call focus breathing. If you zoom into 100mm at f2.8, when you're taking portrait, usually you're almost at the minimum focusing distance of the lens. And with this guy, when you do that, 100mm can sometimes feel like it's not truly zoomed in. It feels almost like you zoom out a little bit to about 80 or 70mm. Not a big problem for me personally, but that means that sometimes compression is better with the Olympus 75mm compared to this guy zoomed in all the way at 100mm. Anyway, I need to share with you that this 35-100mm is the original first version. Now there's the second version and also the Panasonic Leica version of the 35-100mm f2.8. I don't know if they already fixed this issue or not, but maybe this is something that you need to be aware of. Next, for landscape photography, definitely I prefer the 35-100mm f2.8. Again, this is a zoom lens, and for landscape, you cannot always guarantee that one single focal length will give you the best result. So the ability to zoom in and zoom out is definitely appreciated for landscape photography. But again, that doesn't mean that the Olympus 75 cannot be used for landscape. You can use this for landscape. I've used it for landscape photography many times, got great result with it. It's just that it's a little bit more challenging compared to the 35-100. Next, for travel photography, and obviously for travel, I prefer zoom lens, the 35-100. With travel photography, you don't always have the luxury to be able to slow down. Sometimes moments happen very quickly and you have to be responsive to every kinds of situations in order to get the best shots. So a zoom lens like this is highly appreciated. The flexibility and versatility really helps for travel photography. And again, that doesn't mean that you cannot use the Olympus 75mm for travel. You definitely can, but again, there will be some challenge because you cannot zoom in and zoom out with the 75mm. Next, for fun, which lens that I will choose for just having more fun? And the answer obviously is the Olympus 75mm. Yes, it is less flexible than the 35-100. It's not as easy to use. It is in fact challenging, but the Olympus 75mm, as I mentioned before, provides me with what I call healthy challenge. Not too easy to the point where I can just solve this challenge of using one focal length easily, instantly, but it's also not too difficult to the point where I don't get motivated to pick this lens up and do photography with it. So it is a healthy challenge and it makes photography more fun to me. And that's also one of the reasons why I take more pictures using the Olympus 75mm compared to the 35-100mm. Fun is important in photography. As I mentioned before, photography isn't just about getting nice pictures. It's also about having fun, enjoying the process of photography. And that wraps up today's video. So that is all of the comparison between the Panasonic 35-100 and the Olympus 75mm. Hopefully this comparison has been helpful, informative, inspiring, and entertaining as well. So now I wanna hear more from you guys. Which one do you prefer? The Panasonic Lumix 35-100 or the Olympus 75mm? Which one is better for you? Please let me know on the comment down below and let's have a little bit of discussion. Also, if you have any question about today's video, comment down below as well and I will try my best to answer them. Also, don't forget to support my channel by liking this video, sharing this video, subscribing to my channel down below. And if you want to support my work even further, consider using the affiliate links on the description below. Use the super thanks button to make a small donation to my channel or purchase my travel photography course ebook called Simplifying Travel Photography. Link also on the description below. Thank you and I will see you on the next video. Goodbye.